Dr. Charles Kupchan, he's Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, joining us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Kupchan, your assessment first up of the statement coming in from President Trump, the ceasefire that's been announced, and of course, how do you see things here on in terms of the 10-point proposal that's been presented to the U.S. from the Iranian side?
Well, given where we were a couple of hours ago, clearly I think everybody can breathe a sigh of relief. It's now 8:30 p.m. here in the United States, about a half hour after the deadline, and we could have expected a massive air campaign on bridges, on civilian infrastructure, on trains, on water desalination, and instead we have the beginnings of a ceasefire. That's good news for all parties. I would keep a close eye on two issues. One is the one your correspondent was just talking about, and that is, does this ceasefire stick? Does it take effect? Yes, we're hearing that some missiles are still landing in Israel, in the Gulf states. Maybe these are just left over. Maybe not. Maybe there are elements within the Iranian military that are going to keep fighting. We also need to watch whether the Strait of Hormuz opens to traffic. There are hundreds of ships sitting on the Persian Gulf waters waiting to get through the strait. The statement from Iran is, I think, hopeful, but it is guarded. It's with the cooperation of the IRGC. This is a hint that they'll be open, but let's wait and see. And then the other key issue is the one that you just mentioned, the 10-point plan. There are lots of different plans floating around. We don't know exactly what's in this version, but the Iranians have been asking for a complete drop of the sanctions, both the UN and the American. They want control of the Strait of Hormuz. They've talked about charging millions of dollars for ships that pass through the strait. No mention of the key issues on Trump's agenda, which is get rid of the highly enriched uranium, no more enrichment, cap the ballistic missiles, no more support for extremist proxies. So those conversations scheduled to start in Pakistan on Friday are going to be tough.
And Dr. Kupchan, I'll come in there regarding this 10-point plan, which Trump says is a workable situation. There is an irony there. If this was workable, why did a war even take place? But let me quickly go over these 10 points. An end of all attacks. Okay, that's a consequence of the war. Full sanctions relief. That's something Iran has been dealing with gravely. Halt all Israeli strikes. That seems to be something that US can ensure that it takes place. Reconstruction support. How much US is going to give to Iran as reparations, that remains to be seen. Secure Hormuz shipping, a $2 million fee per ship. Will the US ever allow that? No more attacks on its allies. Now, for Iran, they're going to call them allies. US sees them as terrorist proxies. So that's a complete distinction over there. And money to rebuild, of course, goes part of the reparation. So that just a loose understanding of what those 10 points essentially look at. But then that nuclear capability of Iran, that seems to be as questionable as it was even before any of these wars happened, where the US also got involved directly, and before that when Israel got involved. Where do things stand? What's going to be achieved in the next 2 weeks, which could not have been achieved so far, in your understanding?
Well, I think we have to wait and see. I do think that Donald Trump is in a place that he did not expect, right? He thought that this would be a fast war. He thought that the regime would collapse, the Iranian people would take to the streets. He would go down in history as the American president who had the guts to do what no one else would do, topple the Islamic Republic. Well, that's not what happened. The Islamic Republic seems to have strengthened its grip, and this conflict led to a huge shock to global supplies of oil, liquid natural gas, fertilizer, helium. Trump is now facing a worsened affordability crisis here in the United States. So he is looking for an off-ramp, and I think the Iranians are also looking for an off-ramp. They are getting hit hard by American and Israeli strikes. But as you were just suggesting, the two sides remain quite far apart. And Trump cannot afford to walk away from this conflict with Iran enriching uranium, with Iran continuing to build its ballistic missile stores, because then this would look like a war that achieved nothing. So that's why I think there's going to be a lot of difficult negotiation in the days and weeks ahead.
Yes. Dr. Kupchan, a follow-up question. All said and done, ceasefire in place, Strait of Hormuz opening. Talk to us about the earlier threat that was issued by Donald Trump regarding annihilation of Iran. Would that not tantamount to war crime? That is, hypothetically, if that were to happen and US would attack the civilian infrastructure in Iran. Do you think Trump did not factor that in, that the kind of precedent that a superpower would set for the other countries if that were to happen?
Well, I do think that there were a couple of different factors that led to Trump's decision to step back. One was the prospect of more Iranian retaliation against the Gulf states, against oil facilities, against desalination plants, and that would have created an even worse crisis, higher oil prices. And I think Trump was surprised by the resilience of the Iranian regime and its ability to strike back and to hit a couple of American warplanes just in the last few days. And then the other issue is the one that you've mentioned. I think he was getting a lot of pushback, including from members of his own party, by talking about destroying Iranian civilization, putting Iran back to the Stone Age, hitting targets that most people believe are really off limits according to humanitarian international law, which says you got to go after military targets, not civilian targets. But I do think that, unfortunately, we now have a US government that doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to international rules and norms. And hopefully in this instance, they were deterred by the prospect of doing things that would have brought condemnation from the international community. But we are living through a period of increasing great power rivalry, contestation, and the norms that have been built to create a rules-based system, they are in the process of being eroded in a way that I think is quite concerning.
You had mentioned this in your earlier response. I wanted to just get you to elaborate or request you to elaborate a little more on that. At the end of this war, considering this is the end of this war and a 2-week ceasefire translates into something longer and there is peace in the region, what was achieved at the end of these 6 weeks, apart from the fact that Iran has established itself as a major power in the West Asian region, one country that has the ability to send shockwaves across the world, even that means even reaching the US in terms of fuel prices, and the fact that it can continue to fight and target all Gulf nations as and when it wants. Apart from this, what else would be the outcome that one would read into when you look at the history books?
I don't think we can answer that question now because we just don't know what kind of settlement could potentially emerge. I think we can say this, that the original objective of the United States and Israel has not been met. I think it's safe to say that the war began as a regime change war. Both of them, the US, the Israelis, they really wanted to take out a regime that has been causing instability in the region for decades, and then to create a very different political and geopolitical landscape in the Middle East. That doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Then the second option is to create and build and craft some kind of Islamic Republic 2.0 that the region and the Americans can live with, that is no longer focused on building an axis of resistance, that no longer chants on a regular basis death to Israel and death to the United States. Are we going to get that Islamic Republic 2.0? Very, very difficult to say. Right now, this regime is angry, it's wounded, and in some ways it is even more hardline than the regime that was taken down by the missiles. That is to say, Father Khamenei rather than son Khamenei, the new supreme leader. But let's see where this conversation goes. let's see what kind of deal can be struck that leads to a tamer and more benign Iran. If that new Iran doesn't emerge, then I think this war will have proved to have been a failure.
A follow-up question to the earlier point that you made regarding the pushback that President Donald Trump is facing. Do you think Trump factored that as well while announcing the ceasefire? Because we have a statement also coming in from the House Democrats who've also called in the Republicans to put the end to the kind of war games that we are seeing on the battlefield. Do you think that pressure probably also forced President Trump to make the decision that he has now?
You know, if I had to kind of guess what most concerned Trump, it was the global market. It was the prospect of oil at $150 or $200 a barrel. It was the prospect of a huge shock to stocks and bonds because of a slowdown to the global economy. And Trump was in trouble politically before this war began. His immigration policy overreached, and then you had a popular backlash. And even though Trump says the economy has been going well, it hasn't been going well for average Americans who are not seeing their wages go up, but who are seeing the cost of living go up because of Trump's tariffs. And in that respect, I think that Trump is in some ways trying to find a way to resuscitate his presidency. The Iran war may have been such an effort, but at this point, one can say that it has effectively backfired because he has alienated his base. He had told his base that we're not doing this anymore. We're done with these forever wars in the Middle East. He told he was going to reduce the cost of living. Now Americans are paying $4+ per gallon at a gas station. So right now, I think Trump is in political trouble. I think the Democrats are in pretty good shape to take back the House and the Senate. But let's wait and see what unfolds in the coming weeks when it comes to this ceasefire, whether it holds and whether Trump can actually get a good deal at the negotiating table.
Dr. Kupchan, and you mentioned we'll have to wait and watch what happens in the time to come. The midterm elections in the US are going to come eventually. It's just a little later this year. When you look at the way those calls for the 25th Amendment are growing and in unison from the opposition to Trump, it's mostly the Democrats. But is that a clear sign that in case that balance in the Senate or in the Congress, it changes post the midterm elections, we already know what the Democrats are going to do?
Well, I think that the Democrats are quite likely to take back the House. The Senate is a bit of a toss-up right now. There are also various efforts around to affect mail-in voting, to change the Civil Rights Voting Act. There are gerrymandering efforts going on in both Republican states and in Democratic states. So it's difficult to game this out right now. But I think what you would see is a lot of investigations by a House that's controlled by the Democrats, perhaps yet another effort to bring an impeachment case against President Trump, which doubtful would go anywhere because it would be blocked by Republicans. But I think what you'll see if the Democrats do take back one or both houses is simply more paralysis. There is a lot that the House cannot do, that the president is the commander in chief. The House could not have stopped this war against Iran, even if the Democrats had been in control. So I don't think it fundamentally alters the Trump administration, that is to say, boxes it in. But I do think it will lead to a great deal of contestation and perhaps even paralysis when you have the House in the hands of Democrats that are very angry with Trump, and Trump, will continue to attempt to exercise extreme executive authority.
Yes. Dr. Kupchan, that's all the time we have on the broadcast, but we will come back to you and discuss this going forward as well. And Shivan, thank you to you as well for getting us all those inputs.
Pleasure to be with you. Bye-bye.